Look at this for efficiency. We're going to wrap up both hot topics 8 and 7 in one fair swoop here, because we're going to look at technology and its impact on fairer outcomes and general participation. Don't forget the other two categories that are in this course as well. We're going to cover these two. By the way, if you want to go and have a more comprehensive look at technology, the course on the platform, all the hot topics are identified for you in the course, but also TheEverLearner.com, that is. And moreover, folks, we've got previous year's revision that you can do where we look at a sort of a speedier look at lots of things. Here we're taking a bit more time to be a bit more detailed. Use the image below to identify two advantages and then complete the exam question. First of all, what is this showing? This is effectively the impact of technology on fair outcomes. Start to be thinking here about officials, referees, decision making. You're probably terms coming into your minds like TMOs in rugby, VARs in football, connections in earpieces and microphones, all of the measuring devices, all of these things are relevant. So what do we get? Officiating, we get more accurate decisions. That is definitely a positive. Measurement, we get a more precise, fewer dead heat. So because we can go to the thousandth of a second, for example, in 100-meter sprinting, it's less likely that we get a dead heat, say. We get overturning poor decisions through video technology. That, of course, is a positive. We actually, so a poor decision has been made, we can overturn it because we've got VAR, we've got TMO, we've got Hawkeye, we've got Eagle Eye, there's all kinds of different things. Reduces cheating, better detection of foul play. That, of course, is a positive. Drug testing, we get better doping detection. The dopers are less ahead of the testers. That's a positive. Inclusion, we get Paralympic sport much more prevalent in society. That is a positive. Now, we got a couple of negatives here. The technology is not always used by the good person, right? We could have a negative in the sense of drug taking and doping high technology. So, lad, the one that springs to my mind is Balco. Now, go and read about Balco if you're interested, but it's the Bay Area Laboratory Corporation. But Corporation? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But that is a guy, if you want to go into it, there's a guy called Vic. I don't want to slander this guy, I don't libel this guy, but this guy called Victor Conte. And through a bizarre series of events, ended up effectively providing doping agents through a technological lab in Bay Area, which I believe is Los Angeles, San Francisco, somewhere around there. And he provided people like Marion Jones, Tim Montgomery, Shane Mosley, the boxer. This is going back sort of 15, 20 years. But these were some of the most high profile, and there was a very high technology organisation. It's a nice one to have a look into. Inequality, only for the wealthy. Of course, technology can only be afforded by some. So what we've got there is effectively the structure of an evaluation, right? So what we've got here as a question is, suggest two advantages of modern technology on fair outcomes. So obviously what we're not going to do there is dopers, get ahead of the curve. That's not going to be part of our answer. But modern technology assists with, we could go with precise, and you can choose different, obviously, answers from that image above, precise timings and measurements. And it's important we say what impact this has, not just what it is, measurements, to ensure athletes are placed correctly. So we could say fewer dead heats, but I've gone with athletes are placed. That is like what placement they finish in a race or something like that correctly. This is important. If you're going to train your whole life to go and compete in some Olympic games at high jump or 100-meter sprinting or whatever, or Olympic rowing, you don't want some dodgy clock saying that you and the one next to you finished in the same position, even though you beat them. That is going to be pretty irritating. So technology helps with that. Second one, technology can be used to overturn. I'm going to introduce a word here, overturn poor officiating decisions. So when an official gets it wrong, which will happen, by the way, in any sport, because they're human beings, that have poor officiating decision, to make sure, so here's the impact now, to make sure correct decisions occur more. Correct decisions. Maybe outcomes. Decisions, outcomes, little slash there, occur more often. And again, it's the same point. If you're an athlete and you're training at those very high standards, and you go, and we've seen some really good examples in the last few years, but if you go to some kind of event, you're a taekwondo player and the sensors are not working when you kick them up clearly in the abdomen, that's going to be really irritating to you. Anyway, impact of modern technology now on general participation. What have we got here? This is more. Look at the highlighted terms, then bold terms. Accessibility. More people can access sport through hoist ramps. That's literally about accessibility into buildings, facilities, swimming pools, second floors, first floors, lifts, all kinds of stuff like that. Motivation, information and feedback provides incentives. Think about how many people use Strava. I've got a crazy app. I'm not endorsing it because it's definitely not for everyone. It's called Run Zombie Run. And I go around my local streets, and this app is telling me that I've got a zombie on my tail, and as I turn a corner, they're just there. It's a good one. I don't know if anyone else would enjoy it, but I like it. It makes me run faster. Progress and enjoyment. Some technology makes learning new skills more fun. I would, again, that one's a nice one for my example. Inclusion. Disabled participants can take part more easily with blades, adaptive wheelchairs. That inclusivity point is a really important one. Opportunity. Sports can be played in all weathers as a result of 4G pitches, so we get fewer cancellations. Mass production of sport and equipment. We've got more affordable prices for high technology. I remember the first proper tennis racket I bought. It was ludicrously expensive. These days you can get a really nice tennis racket for a sensible fee. I'm not going to say what I paid back in the day because it was mental. But these days that equivalent racket would be a very low consideration purchase. When I did so back in the day, it was expensive. Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought. Let's have a look at this one. Explain how modern technology is influential, or is it influencing general participation? Now, what we've got there is we've effectively got a representation of what we went before, but I'm going to do something as we go through. Through increased opportunities such as improvements in 4G services or even inflatable domes, which means sports can be played throughout the winter. There's a nice answer, exactly from before. Through, I don't write in the same way as this font, motivation, because runners say enjoy the feedback they get from apps like Strava and they aim for personal bests. Through mass production such as full carbon tennis rackets, you see what I was thinking, that are affordable for the general population. I'm still suffering for the cost of that finally. Through accessibility such as electric hoists being used to increase disability participation in swimming. Now you've seen me highlight a word 4 times there. That is because the answer above, one, explaining how word has been used 4 times, find it and then note down how the word is used. Well, the word is through. And by the way, there are other alternatives. You could use by, you could use via, you could use this causes. These are all sort of equivalents that you could use. So it's not just one word you could use. But when we are explaining how, folks, we have to say through what process, through what mechanism, through what facility does that happen? By what does that happen? Its role is to cause us to state how. Now, I want to be clear. The word if you write the word through in an exam answer, it's pretty unlikely that that's the thing that's going to get you the mark, right? It's pretty unlikely that it's actually that thing that gets you the mark. That's not going to happen. But what is going to come after your answer is very likely to be in this explaining how theme. And just again, we've got alternatives such as via, we've got by, we've got this, causes. Those are really nice ones for you to use. There's other ones as well, but those ones are really nice for you to get into your answers. I don't know to what degree you can hear it. I sort of record these things and broadcast these things from down the end of cabin down the end of my garden. And my cat is having wars outside the building with 2 magpies which are attacking him. So he seems to be enjoying it. But it's so noisy. So if you can hear those magpies there, I apologise. I'm not sure what to do really apart from start lobbing stuff. Anyway, let's have a look at this. Don't lob stuff at birds. Sometimes you say things when you're doing live stuff that you go, hang on, I shouldn't have said that. Don't lob stuff at birds. Don't lob stuff at cats. Be kind to animals. Full stop. Anyway, just come at me, gob. Discuss the reasons why elite sports and the media develop relationships. Sport and the media develop relationships as both parties are what? Interested in making increased profit. I'll just put increasing profit. It literally, guys, the answer, without meaning to quote the 4 members of ABBA, is money, money, money. That is why this is happening. That was them on ABBA, yeah. That is why this is happening, to make that profit greater, are supposed to increase revenue and make greater profit margin. Economics and accountancy students, to increase their EBITDA. So those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Media companies need sport. So what do media companies need them for? They need sport in order to provide. I'm going to put the spectacle. You could say a spectacle. I'm not talking about a set of glasses on your nose. I'm talking about something that's spectacular people want to look at, for them to broadcast. Just step back from what the media is for them to broadcast. The media puts out information, TV programs, sports events, films, whatever, magazines. They put those things out to catch people's attention. That's what a media company is. One can also argue they have a societal role to sit between those with power and those that don't, but that's a whole other conversation. But here, what we are saying is that the media buys the rights to sports such as football, golf, cricket, rugby, tennis, choose your sport. They buy those rights because if they play them through, say, their TV player, they are going to take the attention of more people onto that thing. That is what we mean by a spectacle. And things that are considered very spectacular are top-level boxing matches or MMA, big football matches, rugby finals. These are very spectacular for people to watch. That's why they attract, one could argue, the most money. Elite sports, what do they need? They need the revenue. They need the revenue generated. They need the revenue generated from media rights. And what are they going to do with that media rights? So obviously the media company is going to pay the sport, right? The Premier League, the promoter of a boxing match, whatever. In order to what? They're going to use it to invest. Okay, so if we look at, I was at Wembley Stadium recently, for example. If we look at Wembley Stadium, say, part of the money that have gone into paying that, apart from all the club fees that are paid and all the yellow cards anyway, not that I ever got any, but one of the things going to pay for that is that the money from media rights is going to be filtered through, to some degree, the Football Association, certainly through the Premier League, and that of course is going to be potential to be invested, this money into growing the sport further. So let me use Wembley Stadium as that example. Now, the question we got before was 2/3 of the Golden Triangle. You will know the Golden Triangle because it's the relationship between elite sport, that word's crucial, media companies and sponsors to create revenue and increase profit to all three. Okay, so our question asked specifically about elite sport and media, which is why we've sort of squared those two in red. Therefore, there will be no marks awarded directly for discussing the role of sponsors. Notice how this slightly changes the answer. What if this was the question? Okay. What if this is a question? What if it was the relationship between all three? And of course, we would maybe supplant that entire answer above, but we would maybe down here make a further statement. Sponsors benefit. This is obviously at the end of that answer we had already. Sponsors benefit by more people seeing their advert for their, what shall I choose? For their hair product. I don't know where I've got that from. It really should be a gambling company in modern sport. For their hair product, and helps this to become a household name. So if you think about it from the sponsor's perspective, what do they want to happen? They want people to see their product, desire their product, want to go out and buy their product. So where do they place this thing? They place their hair product. I was thinking like Brill cream or something. They place their, I'm really old. They're placing their hair product, their gambling company, their gaming console, whatever it happens to be, their beer. They're placing that product and advertising it and making it look desirable in the context of being sat right next to it, or even being shown within a spectacular event like a big sports event. That's what you see if you watch any sport. Let's say the shape of your sport is rectangular. I'm thinking rugby. I'm thinking football. I'm thinking let's say netball. Have you noticed how there's lots of advertising around the outside of this sort of space? Think of a football pitch. You've got these advertising boards. Why is that? It's because your eyeballs are, what have I drawn, are looking there. So if I have my advert here, those eyeballs are going to see that. I mean, I'm not sure what my two eyeballs are doing. It's got ridiculous. But yeah, it looks like two people wearing sombreros from above. The one on the left is leaning into the one on the right. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about that right there. Globalization, folks, we're getting warm. Okay, I find questions like this really interesting, and there's a couple of things I want to do here. But first of all, let's just look at the question. Explain how globalization has changed the nature of association football since the end of the 20th century. So one of the things I encourage students to do is when you get stuff like that, like just make sure you're clear when that is. The end of the 20th century was January 31st in 1999. So I'm just going to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Actually, the year I became a teacher. Anyway, but that's when the end of the 20th century actually occurred. So we are framing things that have happened after this date. Okay, and that's really important because if I don't get that clear, I could be writing about 100 years earlier if I don't figure this out, or I'm writing. Well, I suppose you can't write about the future, but you see my point. The other thing, before we get into this, I really feel this answer would be better if it had the word through, by media companies providing, through spectators watching matches, etc. But let's just look at our answer. The key thing I want to do, because I explained how, of course, but the key thing I want to do here is look at sport in the 21st century, of course, is what happens after night. That's another good way of putting it in it. This actually is mentioned at the end of the 20th century. It's actually, the question is actually about the 21st century, right? It's kind of sneaky that, because it's said at the end of the 20th century, so it's since that point. So it's actually about the 21st century. So there's a little sneaky point we've got going on there. So what have we got? We've got the idea of cheap flights mean people can travel all across the UK, Europe, and even the world to spectate football matches such as Champions League or Club World Cup. So, okay, so we've got the idea here of kind of the possibility of freedom of movement. So here, this would be spectators travel. So that globalization comes in at that point there. We've got media companies provide wider coverage from across the world. So we've got the idea there, here, international broadcast events there. We've got spectators can watch matches far more frequently than the traditional once a week on a Saturday. So we've got the idea here of increased viewing opportunity. In other words, folks, one of the things we want to do is effectively learn these three columns about 21st century globalization, and then what we need to be able to do is then apply them to a particular example that's provided. So let's have a look at this one here. Explain how global media coverage has changed the nature of association football since the end of the 20th century. So again, the same wording, since the end of the 20th century. And we've got to make 3 points here, okay? So if we're talking about football in this sense, obviously what we've got here is exactly that structure. Explain how. What we can do here is we can say, right, we can take, and by the way, guys, let's just go up to here. This one explained how globalization as a whole, that allows us to pick that entire, this column, this column, this column. But this question here is explain how globalized media coverage has changed. That means that only this material is correct. And I'm going to go for through the broadcast of international football leagues to UK TV stations. And I'll mention this one because I watch this one all the time. It's just one I happen to know, such as La Liga, which of course is the Spanish Premiership. La Liga, shown on Premier Sports. Now I know that one because my family is half Spanish. Half my family's from Barcelona. Of course, we're big FC Barcelona fans, and therefore we watch Barcelona matches, Clásico and others, on Premier Sports. So therefore we got access to that despite being in the UK. Do you see how that comes from there? Now, we have got another one. I've got to get something like constant into my answer. Through the broad range, and I know you're writing down my answers here, of matches shown from Spain, England, I'll just choose some countries here, Scotland, it's a C in there, Scotland, I'll go for Germany, and the one I've really got into this, and Argentina, I don't know why, but I'm watching a load of Argentinian football this year, and Argentina, a fan can watch almost constantly. Do you see how that answer has been brought from that point? And then the third one here, we can say here, by high viewing figures. I've left myself not much space here. By high viewing, I should put through high viewing figures. The rights to, let's go for WSL, to the WSL, the Women's Super League, is ever more expensive. Now, I could say the impact of that, I could say that means that players get more money, etc., is ever more expensive and becomes big business. And, you know, if we think about what's happening in the women's football, for example, we've got Arsenal winning the Champions League. What a goal, by the way, from Blackstenius. We've got, obviously, England women doing particularly well. Actually, other home nations women doing quite well as well. Some good teams playing across the UK at the moment, but England potentially, you know, holders and defending champions in the Euros this summer. You see how that becomes big business as a result, and the rights, the media rights, mean that it becomes more and more expensive in that. And I should have put the media rights here. I should have put the word media there. But guys, I just want to stress for that particular question, what did I not write about? That or that? Why? Globalized media coverage. That is the kind of detail, folks, that will differentiate you from other students.